And we have aviation expert Glenn Farley with us now to talk a little bit about this big decision. You were speaking with aviation expert John Nance yesterday, and he says that.
And I talked to him today already too.
So what's the reaction to this?
Well, I think the reaction is right now we have a lot of political involvement, basically in an engineering problem. Because when you look at flying, when you look at all these systems and all of these airplanes, it's basically science. Boeing has sort of lost control of any narrative here. The FAA has clearly lost control, but I don't think anybody's surprised. There is a lot of concern, some of it by other members of our own staff, about getting on one of these airplanes. One of those people is on an airplane today. We assured her it was not a MAX, but that's kind of where this has sort of ended up. And I think part of the background here is this is sort of a disruption globally to what has been the safest period in aviation we have ever seen. I mean, in the last 10 years, we have had one fatality aboard a US-owned airliner. That was that woman who was killed as a result of that engine explosion aboard a Southwest jet a year ago, April. That plane managed to land safely. The last one among a U.S. carrier was in 2009. Other countries, particularly in the third world, have struggled more with that, but there was criticism from the president last night that airplanes have become too complex. The fact is a lot of that complexity is one of the reasons we've been able to get to where we are. They have, in terms of the sophistication of the airplanes, a lot of this is in terms of the safety systems. The MCAS system involved here is actually a safety system that was designed to keep the 737 MAX from going into a stall attitude. Where things sort of broken down in that original situation, in that original accident last October, was that pilots said it was not in the flight control manual, they were not briefed up on it, and the question was how should they react to something that they didn't know about.
But since then, there has been a directive to
Since then, there has been, although the procedure was in the manual in terms of what to do. If you end up with what's called a runaway trim situation that would force the nose of the plane down, you throw these two switches off. My discussions with John yesterday and then just now he said that should still be in play. How similar this ultimately ends up being between Indonesia and Ethiopia, we don't know yet. But that pilot aboard that Ethiopian plane should have been fully dialed in to what that procedure was.
So the black boxes are now in Europe from the Ethiopian crash, and so we should be getting some information about the potential clues.
Part of what we have here is they found the black boxes right away. Remember, there's two of them. Even though they're come in an orange case, the cockpit voice recorder, what was said on the flight deck of that airplane, not only what was said between the pilots, but also audible warning signals, other sounds external to the airplane, somebody coming into the cockpit saying, a flight attendant saying something's going on in the back. Any of that could have been picked up. Then you have a very sophisticated flight data recorder that basically has the ability to basically monitor and record for a number of, even not just that flight, but previous flights, what was going on with a great deal of precision on the airplanes. 20 years ago, we had like 11 of those parameters. However, what we're hearing here, what the president talked about, was the satellite telemetry, this ADS-B data that captures a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that, and sort of phones home with that. So we do have some information, and that appears to be what the Canadians were talking about.
And the reason why the FAA has now issued this.
Yeah, but they've sort of, so if people feel better by stopping these flights until this is going to be worked out, which I think is sort of the underlying question here, okay. But what the FAA has said, because they can see a lot of this telemetry data, they get a lot of these reports from pilots, from airlines. There's 371 of these in service right now in terms of what links all this together. Are we getting other incidents where we're having a pitch down attitude that doesn't result in an accident? And the NTS, or the Federal Aviation Administration, their statement said last night, we are not seeing a systemic, meaning We're not seeing the system showing repeated cases of other things to suggest that this is a problem. But right now, we have a big hole in terms of the information we're getting out of this Ethiopian accident.
Thank you, Glenn. And we're expecting to hear from the FAA soon on this, so we'll bring that to you just as soon as that happens.